Guys are so deep and involved in this that Diddy just might be called up on that Tupac shit.
We don't talk about things that are nonsense. We don't even entertain nonsense, my brother. So we're not even going to go there, with all due respect, but I appreciate you as a journalist asking.
What if I told you that after 27 years of silence, the truth about Tupac's murder is finally cracking wide open? That hidden footage of his final moments could take down one of the biggest empires in hip-hop. And the feds are already closing. In This Isn't Rumor, this is the reckoning hip-hop has been running from for nearly 3 decades. For 27 years, silence covered one of hip-hop's darkest mysteries, but that silence has finally broken. Dwayne "Kefty" Davis, once confident his immunity deal made him untouchable, now sits in a federal cell with nothing left to protect him. The walls began to close when Gene Deal, Diddy's former bodyguard, claimed there exists real footage of Tupac's final moments, proof, not rumor, that could dismantle empires built on blood and deception. While families grieved, moguls thrived, and secrets multiplied in the shadows, but time has a way of catching up. Kefty's arrogance became his downfall. Years of interviews, boasts, and tell-all confessions turned his own voice into evidence. Every word another nail in his coffin. Yet his arrest isn't the conclusion, it's the beginning. Federal agents know that when a street legend is cornered, memory becomes a weapon. Kefty remembers who paid him, who protected him, and who stands to lose everything if the truth comes out. For decades, powerful figures slept soundly behind lawyers and money while he kept their secrets. But that shield has evaporated. Now, the prosecutors don't care about influence or fame, they care about evidence. And Kefty, willingly or not, has just become the centerpiece of hip-hop's most dangerous reckoning.
So deep and involved in this that Diddy just might be called up on that Tupac.
Enter Gene Deal, not a blogger spinning wild theories. Not a clout-chasing street reporter, but the man who once stood between Diddy and real danger. As Diddy's bodyguard, he was the shield, the one who literally took hits, so his boss didn't have to. He's not an outsider guessing at the game. He lived it from the inside, in the shadows where cameras never reached. And now, Gene has dropped a revelation that rewrites the story. Kefty once saved Diddy's life. Picture at the House of Blues, tension heavy in the air, Diddy and Gene outnumbered, vulnerable. Then, out of nowhere, Kefty arrives with 220 men at his back, instantly shifting the balance, turning a vulnerable moment into untouchable strength.
Many people with us. But then Kefty D shows up and he got like 15 or 20 guys with him. So they all around us.
In the street world, there's an unspoken law that cuts deeper than any written statute. If someone saves your life, you owe them everything. That's not just gratitude, it's blood debt. It's loyalty written in ink that doesn't fade. A lifetime bond that's supposed to outlast every deal, every hustle, every shift in fortune. The rule is simple: you never forget the man who shielded you from death. In that world, a life saved becomes a life owned. But according to Gene Deal, the man who spent years as Diddy's bodyguard and confidant, that sacred code never applied to Diddy. He didn't operate on the same principles the streets were built on. His bond with Dwayne "Kefty" Davis wasn't born out of friendship, loyalty, or gratitude, it was a business move. Cold calculation, disguised as brotherhood. Gene lays it out clearly. Diddy didn't bring Kef close, because he saw him as family. He gave him access, backstage passes, tickets, VIP seats, and proximity to power, not because he respected him but because he needed him. Kef wasn't a brother, he was insurance. He was the shield. To outsiders, it might have looked like camaraderie, but to those who understand the game, it was strategy at its purest. When rival crews circled, when tension spiked, Diddy needed muscle, and Kef had it. By aligning with Kef, Diddy borrowed his presence, his soldiers, his reputation, his entire aura of danger. It was less about respect and more about survival. Fast forward to the present day. Kefty now sits in a federal cell, stripped of the illusion of protection, staring down the kind of charges that don't just threaten freedom but life itself. For nearly 3 decades, he might have believed that his role in the story guaranteed him a lifeline, that when the walls closed in, Diddy would extend a hand, send lawyers, push money through hidden channels, or at the very least make a few calls to show that the old bonds still meant something. Because that's how it's supposed to work in the code of the streets. You save a man, you protect him, you hold his secrets, he pays that debt back when you need it most. But Gene Deal destroys that expectation with brutal honesty. Diddy can't help him. Not because he doesn't want to, but because he doesn't dare. And this is where the story twists into cold irony. The very man Kef shielded, the very empire he indirectly helped fortify, is the one who now has to leave him to the wolves. Because the moment Diddy lifts a finger in Kef's defense, the moment he wires $1 or hires a lawyer, it ceases to look like loyalty and begins to look like confession. In the eyes of federal prosecutors, assistance is admission. Every call, every check, every legal retainer becomes a breadcrumb leading back to involvement. In a system where perception shapes prosecution, Diddy's silence is his only shield. Helping Kef might protect an old associate, but it risks burning his entire empire to ash. Gene doesn't sugarcoat this reality. He paints Diddy as what he's always been, self-preserving, calculating, selfish when survival is at stake. And in truth, that selfishness isn't unique to Diddy, it's the logic of power. When your billions, your legacy, your reputation, and your freedom hang in the balance, loyalty becomes expendable. Brotherhood becomes optional. Street codes dissolve under the weight of corporate stakes. What's a blood debt compared to $1 billion brand? What's loyalty compared to the machinery of survival? For a mogul like Diddy, preserving the empire will always come before protecting the soldier who once shielded him. And yet, the betrayal cuts deeper because of the history. Kef wasn't just any soldier. He was the man who, according to Gene, once saved Diddy's life. He was the one who showed up with numbers when Diddy was outmanned and vulnerable. He was the one who carried secrets, who kept silent, who played his role in the shadows so the mogul could shine in the spotlight. To abandon him now isn't just strategy, it's an indictment of character. Gene makes it plain. Loyalty was never real in Diddy's world. It was a costume, a role he played when convenient. Discarded the moment it threatened his survival. But here's where the story stretches beyond two men. It's not just about Kef D's downfall or Diddy's self-preservation. It's about what their dynamic reveals about the broader collision between street codes and corporate power. The streets operate on honor, on unwritten laws of debt and loyalty, on respect earned through action. Corporate power operates on contracts, assets, risk management, and plausible deniability. When those two worlds collide, the street code is always the first casualty. Men who came up living by rules etched in blood find themselves discarded by men who play by the rules of money. And the tragedy is that the men in suits still depend on the men in the streets. They need their muscle, their reputations, their silence. But when heat rises, they sever the tie and walk away clean, leaving the soldiers to take the fall. Kef D's situation is the perfect embodiment of that divide. For years he thought he had immunity, not just legal immunity, but cultural immunity, shielded by the belief that his silence and loyalty secured him protection. But that illusion is shattered now. He finds himself isolated, abandoned, realizing that the lifeline he expected will never come. The debt he thought he was owed has been erased by fear, by money, by survival instincts stronger than loyalty. And so the question becomes, what does a man like Kef do in that position? Does he stay silent, protecting the very people who have abandoned him, preserving their empires at the cost of his own freedom? Or does he speak, break the code, and bring others down with him? Gene hints at the answer. Kef is under immense pressure, not just from the feds, but from those who desperately want him quiet. Every word he utters now carries the weight of a bomb. Every name he mentions, every arrangement he confirms, shifts the ground under billion-dollar empires. This is why the betrayal matters so much. It's not just a personal story of one man saving another and being repaid with silence. It's the story of how power operates, how loyalty crumbles under pressure, how the codes of the street clash with the codes of corporate survival. It's a cautionary tale for anyone who still believes in the myth of honor among men who've traded that honor for money, status, and self-preservation. And at the center of it all sits Kef D, a man who once walked with the confidence of protection, now left with nothing but choices, dangerous, impossible choices that could reshape not just his future, but the legacy of hip-hop itself.
Puff can't do this based on what has been said and what has been done in the media. If he does that, it seemed like he did contribute to the
Think about that betrayal for a moment. Kef D put his life on the line for Diddy, offering muscle when it mattered, holding on to secrets for decades, only to be abandoned when the walls began to close in. Street codes talk about life debts, about loyalty written in blood, but when billions of dollars, reputations, and empires are at risk, those codes turn to dust. Gene Deal doesn't soften the truth, he calls Diddy what he is: selfish. When your freedom and legacy are threatened, even the deepest bonds become disposable. Every mogul preaches loyalty until prosecutors come knocking. And Gene's words hit harder because he isn't an outsider. He was there, watching how alliances formed, how protection was traded, and how loyalty vanished the second consequences became real. His testimony carries the weight of lived truth, secrets he once guarded now unraveling the very people he served. As for why justice took 27 years, the answer isn't mystery, it's failure, ego, incompetence, and investigators who thought they were the smartest in the room. Greg Kading, the detective who claimed to have solved it all, made one of the most reckless mistakes imaginable, handing Kef D an immunity deal without even notifying Las Vegas police.
Would you offer Kef D a proper immunity deal? I mean, there's no reason really for it. You probably would have to do that as
Tupac was gunned down in Las Vegas, making it a Vegas case under Vegas jurisdiction, but Greg Kading decided to play federal hero, cutting his own immunity deal with the prime suspect before even looping in local authorities. Only afterward did he call Vegas and essentially say, "By the way, your suspect can talk, but nothing he says is admissible in court." As Bobby Ladd from Compton PD put it, any real detective would lose their mind, years of work, evidence, and leads destroyed by one reckless move. And Gene Deal makes it plain. Kading didn't do this for justice, he did it for profit. A book deal, a movie deal, career clout. He turned tragedy into hustle, while families mourned and fans begged for answers. The immunity deal wasn't about solving crimes, it was about generating content, dramatic confessions for his pages and his screen. But prosecutors don't care about book sales, they care about convictions. And now they're using every word Kef D uttered outside of that protection, every interview, every podcast, every boast, to finally build their case. That's the real tragedy. 27 years of delayed justice because one investigator wanted to be famous. Forget the East Coast versus West Coast narrative, the rivalries, the diss tracks. That was theater. Smoke and mirrors to cover the real battle happening behind closed doors. And here's the revelation Gene Deal lays down. Biggie and Pac weren't simply victims of rap beef. They were eliminated because they threatened the system itself. Tupac wasn't just a rapper, he was a revolutionary. A voice calling out corruption, inequality, and injustice. A man who used music to educate and empower. That made him dangerous to those who profit from division and distraction. Biggie. He wasn't the target, he was collateral damage in a war far bigger than hip-hop. Biggie was never supposed to die that night, he was collateral damage. Gene Deal reveals the real target may have been Diddy himself. But Gene blocked the first attempt, leaving Biggie in the wrong place at the wrong time. And here's what most miss. Tupac and Biggie weren't destined to be enemies, they were destined to reconcile. Once their differences were settled, their combined influence would have been unstoppable. Tupac's own words prove it. He spoke about unity, about uplifting communities, about breaking cycles of oppression. That message terrified the powers who thrived on division. Tupac wasn't just performing, he was planning, educating, planting seeds of revolution. And an educated community doesn't stay silent while it's exploited. The East Coast versus West Coast beef was a distraction. A smokescreen to hide the real agenda, silencing voices that threatened control. Gene insists if Pac and Biggie had lived, hip-hop's trajectory would have shifted. Less glorification of violence and wealth, more music that inspired change. That's why they had to go. Not for rap beef, but for power. And here's where it turns surreal. Kef D literally wrote his own conviction. Not in a hidden confession, but in a book anyone could order online. He admitted in black and white that Tupac and Suge brought the green light on themselves after attacking his nephew, Baby Lane, openly framing the murder as retaliation. But the rabbit hole goes deeper. Back in 1997, whispers already accused Diddy of paying Southside Crips millions to solve his Tupac and Suge problem. Decades later, Kef D confirmed those very details. His memoir lining up perfectly with federal intelligence gathered nearly 3 decades earlier. That's not coincidence, that's evidence. And still, ego dragged him further down. Believing his immunity deal made him untouchable, he bragged in podcasts, interviews, book tours, every boast. Another nail in his coffin. As Greg Kading himself explained, the moment Kef D stepped outside law enforcement's protection, every word he spoke became fair game.
Immunity never ever once came up in any discussion that we had with Keefe D or that we had with his attorney. That word was never discussed because it was always understood that he had self-incrimination protection during our interviews. And that was it. And that all that was his own self, Fifth Amendment type of protection. And that's it. It's not immunity. It was very clear that we were going to take the information that he provided and use that to further our case and further our investigation. And he was absolutely aware of the fact that if other information outside of his confession pointed back at him, that we would use that. So there was never ever any indication whatsoever that
The irony is, staggering, Kef D spent decades shielded by silence, only to destroy himself with words. His own boasts turned into the prosecution's best evidence. Every claim of credibility another nail in his coffin, every mention of immunity, a reminder of guilt. And the chilling truth is this: Kef D didn't act alone. Million-dollar hits require million-dollar backers, and federal prosecutors know it. That's why they're pressing him so hard in jail. Sources even report physical pressure because when legends face life sentences, memories suddenly sharpen, hidden accounts, secret meetings, hushed phone calls, and now Kef D must reckon with the people who grew rich off his silence. The million-dollar question remains: who paid, and what proof ties them to it? That's where Gene Deal drops his bombshell. There's footage, not rumor or myth, but actual video of Tupac's final moments, and Gene says Diddy has it. If true, that means while families grieved and fans begged for answers, the most damning evidence may have been locked away in a private vault. Why hold it? Insurance, leverage, protection. In that world, evidence is currency, something you keep close until it's time to buy survival or destroy someone else. Now federal agents are digging through vaults, archives, and private collections, hunting for that one clip that could link corporate power to street violence. And the stakes. One video could shatter an empire, wiping away decades of denials. In a single frame, meanwhile, Kef D faces impossible pressure talk, and he may save himself while dooming powerful names. Stays silent, and he seals his own fate. Witness protection exists for men like him, but protection comes with a price. In an era where everything is recorded, investigators believe someone, somewhere, still holds the proof. Gene insists this isn't theory, it's fact. The footage exists, and if prosecutors find it before it vanishes, the entire facade collapses. Every denial, every alibi, every carefully managed narrative disintegrates under the weight of video receipts. And as Tupac's own brother now demands accountability. This isn't gossip or speculation anymore, it's blood, it's family, and it's a reckoning 27 years overdue. Law enforcement has a duty, and Tupac's brother sees the cracks in how that duty is being carried out. He's watched Kef D give interviews, naming names, pointing to accomplices, laying out details of money, protection, and arrangements, and yet only one man sits in handcuffs. His question cuts to the core. If prosecutors are using Kef D's words to build a case, why isn't everyone he implicates also being charged? What about the financiers, the protectors, the people who profited? Selective justice isn't justice at all. And what makes his stance so powerful is that he's not lobbing wild accusations, he's asking sharp, legal, necessary questions that expose gaps in the system. If the evidence connects multiple players, why aren't multiple players being held accountable? 27 years later, the Shocker family refuses to accept half-truths or partial justice. Their demand is simple: do the job fully. Don't shield people because of money, status, or influence. Every name Kef D speaks, every accomplice he identifies, deserves the same scrutiny. After nearly 3 decades, the family will not settle for anything less than complete accountability.